Today, I want to talk a little bit about cranky clients. Now, if you guys have been hanging around JoyfulDVM for any period of time, you know that I have identified 4 main categories of veterinary anxiety. So the things that cause us the most stress in the veterinary world. And one of those 4 categories is human interactions. So all of the interacting with clients, with coworkers, with support staff, all of it. The human interaction component is one of the main causes of stress in our profession, and probably, if I'm honest, probably the greatest cause of stress. But today I want to talk about the client aspect specifically. Why is it that cranky clients are such a problem? Why do we get so stressed out about that? Here's what's really interesting about that is we're probably looking at the entire situation the wrong way. What is it that we're making it mean when clients get angry? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. If we take ourselves out of veterinary medicine and we consider what we see day in and day out when we're just out in public, so when we are at restaurants, I think is a great one to consider, and also when we're at like big box stores, we often see people getting pretty upset in those situations, right? So I'm sure you've been in a restaurant where you have seen somebody really laying into a waitress over their meal. So being very difficult, being very unhappy with their service, with their food, whatever it is. I'm sure that you have seen that before. I'm sure you've also been in a big box store where you've been waiting in line to check out and the people in line are getting very frustrated, right? They've got all kinds of things to say. Maybe they're complaining about how slow the cashier is. Maybe they're complaining about that there's not enough cashiers open. Whatever it is, something is setting them off, and they're often verbalizing their frustrations in line while you're waiting along with everybody else. And the reason I want to bring up these 2 situations is because when those people are upset, so people at a table in a restaurant who are complaining and seem disgruntled and unhappy with their meal, or the people in a big box store who are waiting in line to check out and they're unhappy with the cashier or not enough cashiers or the length of the line or whatever, when those people around you are expressing their frustration, what I want you to recognize is that you don't get upset about that, right? That's not a problem for you in that moment. In that moment, when you're just another patron at the restaurant or you're just another patron at the big box store, the people around you, the other patrons who are unhappy, them expressing that doesn't cause you any discomfort. You're not feeling bad at all, and you're also not thinking about how like the cashier or like whatever, like you're probably not thinking about how everything is going wrong in that moment. And the reason I want to bring this up is because when we then step into our own environments in the veterinary world and the clients there get angry, we have a different type of reaction. And so why is that different? That's what I want to look at here for a minute. Why is it different when you're in the veterinary world and a client gets angry as opposed to being somewhere else at a restaurant, at a big box store, and those patrons get angry? Why is it different the way that you feel? Well, so part of you, I'm sure some of you guys are going to say, well, they're not directing it at me. If I'm just a patron like everybody else and those patrons are angry, then that's not directed at me and that's why I'm not upset. But in the veterinary world, if you're in your office and clients are angry, then you do feel like that they are attacking you or they're directing that anger at you. And what I want you to see is that in both cases, the anger is not coming at you at all. So it's easy to see when they're not speaking directly to you, but even in the veterinary world, when clients are upset, what I want you to see is that you don't have to be upset or take that personally because it doesn't actually have anything at all to do with you. And this is something that we really miss because we connect this client satisfaction, if you will, with the value of the services that we provide. We don't necessarily consciously do this, but we definitely have this underlying thing going on where if clients are happy, that must mean that we're doing our job right. And if clients are unhappy, then we must have done something wrong. Or they're just difficult clients, right? So there's like a no-win situation with an unhappy client. Either you're doing something wrong or the client's just crazy. That's usually where we go to. And oftentimes it's a combination of both things. But what I want you to consider is, what if it's not that at all? What if it's just their reaction to whatever their thoughts are? Because that's what's true. The words that other people speak, the actions that they take, they are only a reflection of what's going on within them internally. That's it. It's not a reflection of how well you did your job. It's not a reflection of how well you provided service. And that is the biggest piece for us to really grasp, is that the reaction of the clients is not a reflection of the value that you provide. The reaction of the clients doesn't say whether or not you're doing your job right. We really kind of muddy the line of what our role is in veterinary medicine, because we do want everybody to be happy, and we want the pets to all get better because we actually care. We are a compassion-driven profession. I think that nobody would argue that point. But what comes along with this is a hyper responsibility for other people's feelings, which is completely out of our lane, completely not something that we can control. But if we don't recognize that we have no control or any responsibility at all for the emotions of our clients, then what happens is that we take that on, either knowingly or unknowingly, and then we make their reactions mean something about us personally and about the way that we're doing our job. It becomes a no-win situation. We do a lot to try to mitigate it, though. We do a lot to try to control the reaction of the clients. One of the things that we do is we paint the worst case scenario. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about, when you're giving prognosis, are you one of those like downer doctors that tells them all the things in the world that could potentially go wrong? A lot of us do that because we're just quite honestly trying to cover our ass. So if the patient doesn't get better, then the client was warned in advance that that might happen. And then what? And then therefore they shouldn't be upset if it does happen? Like, that's probably the logic, if we tried to break it down, was if we tell them absolutely everything that could potentially go wrong with their pet, then no matter what happens, they've been told in advance that that was a possibility, and then therefore they should not be mad at me. That's what the logic looks like. It's very skewed. It sounds very weird when we talk through it that way. But the reason that I want to show you this is that all of that effort to try to prepare the client for any outcome is only your effort to control their reaction when that outcome happens. We definitely want to educate our clients. I mean, I think we absolutely should do that. But I want you just to pay attention to, what is it? How are you approaching a prognosis? And what is it that you're hoping to gain? Because here's the part that you're never going to be able to control. No matter what happens, that reaction of that client is not something that you're going to be able to influence. It just isn't. That pet's either going to get better or it's not. And here's the other part. Like, that outcome also not something you control. All you control in the veterinary world, whether you're a veterinarian or a veterinary technician or a practice manager, you only control your part of that client life cycle, of that client, patient, doctor visit, which is, if you're doctors and my technicians out there, you're part of the physical exam, doing a great job at that. My doctor's making a solid medical recommendation. And then we have to let the client decide what they want to do. Then we step back in, follow their decision on how they want to proceed. And then nobody, not the clients, not the technicians, not the doctors, nobody has control over what happens with the patient after that. That patient's own physiology is going to decide whether or not it's going to get better or it's not going to get better. And only after time has passed can we reevaluate that patient and then make some new decisions. But in between there, we've got all kinds of human interaction going on. And so what many of us are doing is not only trying to do the physical exam and make a medical recommendation, but doing all of that through the lens of trying to control how the client is going to react to whatever the outcome is going to be, which is something that we can't control and we cannot predict. We don't know what the outcome is going to be.